The Senate candidate, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, I should say, who was in a runoff in Tupelo, Mississippi, she said during a campaign stop, quote, "If he invited me to a public hanging, I'd be in the front row." She was talking about one of her supporters. And that, of course, has offended a lot of people. And a reporter pressed her on this just in the last day or so. Take a look at how she answered or didn't answer those questions.
Obviously, I'd like to ask the Senator about the public hanging comment.
We put out a statement yesterday, and we stand by that statement.
Could you expand on it then, why you said it, what you meant by it, and why people in the state should not see it as offensive?
We put out the statement yesterday, and it's available, and we stand by that statement.
Senator, are you familiar with Mississippi's history of lynchings?
I put out a statement yesterday, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I put out a statement yesterday, and we stand by the statement, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I put out a statement yesterday. We stand by the statement. We did address it yesterday. Thank you very much.
Just to be clear, her very short statement said that she referred to an invitation to a speaking engagement used an exaggerated expression of regard and that, quote, any attempt to turn this into a negative connotation is ridiculous. So, Dan Balz, a very difficult situation that she's gotten herself into here. And clearly, I mean, how do you even answer a question about this when you've said something like this?
I think the simple thing is to say, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have used those words. I apologize for it. I know people are offended by it, and move on. And not try to put out a kind of an anodyne statement, which is what the original statement was, and then to do what she did yesterday and in a kind of a robotic way refuse to answer any question or make any explanation of it. So she made a bad statement. She mishandled it in the original statement that she issued, and she further mishandled it in this effort.
And Sahil, I mean, this is a situation where she's almost using a Trumpian playbook of never, ever apologize or back down or anything like that. But of course, her opponent in this runoff is an African American man who, did quite well, was former cabinet secretary under Bill Clinton.
Yeah, you're reading the thoughts right out of my mind. I was going to say if it was 4 or 8 years earlier, the thing to do would be just to apologize, as Dan said, say you misspoke, say this was the wrong choice of words, say it didn't mean to offend anyone. But in the Trump era, there is both a permission structure to say things that are perceived as inflammatory and that offend people, and there's an expectation that you don't apologize if you're on that side, because he has morphed that into a sign of weakness rather than a sign of what might otherwise be perceived as simple decency. You didn't mean to say something that evokes the history of awful racism, especially when you're running against an African-American candidate.
Yeah, I mean, and I just think of the fallout. I mean, for minorities in this country who are worried about the government representing them. These are the same people who, want to kneel at a national anthem because they don't feel represented. And just last week, one of Sessions' final things leaving the Office of Attorney General was to weaken the power of the Justice Department's consent decrees, which is their main tool to bring over police brutality, to bring over police departments who may be practicing patterns of racism and using excess brutality. So this is just sort of another one of those points, and you're absolutely right. There's not a need to apologize. She could have easily misspoken, but then maybe the fact that she didn't say more, that actually speaks more to her original misspeaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.